so real.
Disappointed, Edelmira sent off for Europe with 2 small sons, 2 servants, and more than 20 suitcases. She visited lords and the great cathedrals. She had an audience with the Pope. A yacht took her from island to island in the Aegean. In 1922, in Paris, she published a book of children's verse in French and another in Spanish. Then she returned to Argentina. But things had changed. Things had changed. And Edelmira did not feel at ease in her country. Her new book of poems, European Hours 1923, was described in a local newspaper as precious. The nation's most influential reviewer, Dr. Enrique Belmar, described her as an idle, childish lady whose time and energy would be better spent on good works, such as educating all the ragged little rascals on the loose throughout this vast land of ours. Edelmira's elegant reply consisted of an invitation to attend her salon, addressing to Belmar and other critics, which was ignored by all but 4 half-starved gossip columnists and crime reporters. Humiliated, she retired to her ranch in Azul, accompanied by a faithful few. Soothed by the rural calm and the conversations of simple, hard-working country folk, she set to work on her new book of poetry that was to be her vindication. Argentinian Hours, 1925, sparked scandal and controversy from the day of its publication. In her new poems, Edelmira renounced contemplative vision in favor of pugnacious action. She attacked Argentina's critics and literary ladies, the decadence besetting the nation's cultural life. She argued for a return to origins, agrarian labor, and the still wild southern frontier. Flirting and swooning were behind her now. Edelmira longed for the epic and its proportions, a literature unafraid to face the challenge of singing the fatherland. One way and another, the book was a great success, but demonstrating her humility, Edelmira barely took the time to relish her triumph, and soon left for Europe once again. She was accompanied by her children, her servants, and the Buenos Aires philosopher Aldo Corazon, who acted as her personal secretary. She spent the year 1926 traveling in Italy with a numerous entourage. In 1927, she was joined by Mendeluci. In 1928, her first daughter Luz, a bouncing 10-pound baby, was born in Berlin. The German philosopher Hans Hafer was godfather to the child, and the baptism, attended by the cream of the German and Argentinian intelligentsia, was followed by 3 days of non-stop festivities, which culminated in a little wood near Rathenrau, where the Mendelucis treated the Hossenhavers to a kettle drum solo composed and performed by maestro Tito Vasquez, who went on to become a sensation. In 1929, the stock market crash obliged Sebastian Mendeluci to return to Argentina. Meanwhile, Edelmira and her children were presented to Adolf Hitler, who held Luz and said, "She certainly is a wonderful little girl." Photos were taken. The future Führer of the Reich made a great impression on the Argentinian poet. Before leaving, she presented him with several of her own books and a deluxe edition of Martin Ferrera. Hitler thanked her warmly, beseeching her to translate one of her poems in German on the spot, a task which, with the help of Corazon, she managed to accomplish. Hitler was clearly delighted. The lines were resounding and looked to the future. In high spirits, Edelmira asked for the Führer's advice, which would be the most appropriate school for her sons. He recommended a Swiss boarding school, but added that the best school was life itself. Life itself. By the end of the audience, Edelmira and Corazon were committed Hitlerites. 1930 was a year of voyages and adventures. Accompanied by Corazon, her young daughters, the boys were boarding at an exclusive school in Bern, and her 2 Indian servants, Edelmira, travelled up and down the Nile, visited Jerusalem, where she had a mystical experience or a nervous breakdown, which confined her to a hotel bed for 3 days. Then Damascus, Baghdad. Her head was buzzing with projects. She planned to launch a new publishing house back in Buenos Aires, which would specialize in translations of European thinkers and novelists. She dreamed of studying architecture and designing grandiose schools to be built in parts of the country as yet untouched by civilization. She wanted to set up a foundation in memory of her mother, with a mission of helping young women from poor backgrounds to fulfill their artistic aspirations. And little by little, and little by little, and little by little, and little, and little by little, a new book began to take shape in her mind. In 1931, she returned to the Argentinian capital and began to carry out her projects. She launched a magazine, Modern Argentina, edited by Corazon, whose mission was to publish the latest in poetry and fiction, but also political commentary, philosophical essays, film reviews, and articles on social issues. Half of the first number was devoted to Edelmira's book, The New Spring, which came out simultaneously. Part travel narrative, part philosophical memoir, the book reflected on the state of the world and the destinies of Europe and America in particular, while warning of the threat that communism posed to Christian civilization. The following years were rich and productive. She wrote new books, made new friends, traveled to new places. In the north of Argentina, she crossed the Bolivian border on horseback, launched new publishing ventures, and diversified her artistic activity, writing the libretto for her opera, Anna, the Pleasant Redeemer, 1935, whose premiere at the Teatro Colón divided the public and led to verbal and physical confrontations, painting a series of landscapes in the province of Buenos Aires, and collaborating in the production of 3 plays by the Bulgarian author Wenceslaw Hassel. When Sebastian Mendeluci died in 1940, Edelmira was unable to travel to Europe as she would have wished because of the war. To range my sorrow, she composed a death notice which took up a whole page in each of the nation's major newspapers and was signed, Edelmira, the widow Mendeluci. The text no doubt reflected her unstable mental state. It was lightly mocked and derided among the Argentinian intelligentsia. Once again she withdrew to her ranch in Azul, accompanied only by her daughter, the faithful Corazon, and a young painter named Attilio Franchetti. In the morning she wrote or painted. Her afternoons were occupied by long solitary walks or hours of reading. Reading and a bent for interior design gave rise to her finest work, Pose Room, 1944, which prefigured the Nouveau Roman and much subsequent avant-garde writing, and earned the widow Mendeluci an eminent place in the panorama of Argentinian and Hispanic letters. This is how she came to write the book.